Hello. If you'd be so kind as to grab a seat, please, we can move on to our next panel. Thank you all. You're not free of me yet. Again, my name is Victoria Sampson. I'm the Chief Director of Space Security and Stability for the Secure World Foundation. The Secure World Foundation is a nonprofit that focuses on the long-term sustainable use of outer space. We promote best practices and norms of behavior to make sure that space is accessible to, usable for all the long term. It was mentioned earlier, we've been a long-term partnership of MEDB on this conference. Really delighted to be able to be here and be able to contribute to the policy forum. And I think today's policy panel really picks up really nicely in some of the ideas that General Saltzman talked about in his keynote. So we're talking international military SDA sharing. So in 2019, NATO released its first space policy as an institution, and in June of this year released a commercial integration strategy that's along the same lines as what both the US DoD and Space Force released last year. As well, we're seeing the rise of the Quad, Australia, India, Japan, the United States. It's becoming an opportunity, a pathway to sharing SDA information, as is NATO. And so this panel will be discussing pathways for sharing military and SDA data, looking at possible gaps, niches for new SDA operators to bring into the conversation, any conflicts in terms of what policies exist, what do we need to smooth the pathway to make this better and more cohesive, and then talking about looking ahead to the future evolution of military SDA. So I'm really excited about the strong international representation we have here. We have, to my left, Lieutenant Colonel Amandeep Singh, who's the Officer Commanding Space Domain Awareness, the Indian Army Ministry of Defense. And then we have Barb Golf, who's a Strategic Advisor for Pivot SDA, the U.S. Space Force SSC. Then we have Group Captain Rex Harrison, the Director of Space Domain Awareness. Oops, sorry, switched that around. Group Captain Nick Bully, Deputy Head Capability Operations, Royal Air Force. And then Group Captain Harrison, Director SDA, Defense Australia. So with that, I'm going to have each of our panelists give just some brief opening remarks. We'll have some time for some questions that I've set ahead for them, and then looking for the audience to bring in their questions as well. So starting to my left, let's go down the line. Amandeep.
Good morning to all of you. Thank you, Victoria, my fellow panelists, and everybody in the audience. The space domain awareness, what we are, from the military perspective, at looking at, comprises largely, to our understanding, is all the military activities and endeavors for the orbital maneuvers, the space assets, and its all efforts towards its safeguarding. As we have seen on-spot and very specific views of General Saltzman, that it's a collaboration, what is required. Not going to develop further for the SDA, which we all are aware, largely we are all aware. So it's not a competition, it's a collaborative efforts. And a place like this, with a uniqueness blend of industry, academic, and military, will lead to its future successes. I will not would like to focus upon what the military SDA is and what we are all aware. Largely, we are all aware. However, these specifics are safeguarding our own assets. From the Indian perspective, we have created our Defense Space Agency. The Indian Space Research Organization has also created our Space Management Directorate, which focuses and caters the real-time situational awareness and the real-time domain awareness in the space domain. The concepts of collaboration, which I would like to highlight more, that actually leads the tangible results. However, if we intend to compete, so the question of competing with each other is never there. The question is of collaborating, a healthy collaboration, so that this particular global domain, that is the space domain, should become a beneficial figure to our all situational awarenesses, enhance our understanding, and what the young future space children, what they did yesterday and their photograph, I was really inspired to see I should have been there at least 20 years back. And most of us, we can relate ours individually to yourself that if these kind of initiatives had been there 50 years back, we would have been in a very, very better, very, very healthy, very, very collaborative world today. So largely speaking from the military perspective, from the military space domain, the main focus remains to safeguard the space assets, to make a collaborative endeavor with our space-friendly nations and allies. The government of India has taken a lot of efforts focusing on this industry, academic, military, collaborative functioning. And the conferences like AMOS, again, gives a very, very big boost and a very, very good future for the generations to come and a foundational things. And I was really, it was an honor for me to be here on the 26th. So last 25 years of repository knowledge over here. And you may count it average learning experience, what we carry, if we call it the uniformed officers and others, and individually audience, 20 years, and multiply the numbers who are present here. So it's decades and hundreds of years of experience presently in this conference, which we can share with each other, which we collaborate in each other. Last 25 years of AMOS efforts now gives results in every 2 to 3 years. That 25 years of investments has now made that foundational things very strong and very easy for the future generations to take it further on. Rest for the questions, I'll be available at some later stage.
Thank you, Amandeep. Barb, can you give your opening remarks, please?
Yeah, sure. So really glad to be here. We'll bring in some discussions here in the forum for the JCO, Commercial Operations, our CIC partners, the Commercial Integration Cell. These are our partners who have integrated so well into operations across combatant commands that they are now essential. And so how do we train them, incorporate them day-to-day into operations, exercise with them, and prepare for the fact that they are an essential part of our hybrid architectures. We'll look at some opportunities, hopefully, to discuss things like the SDA TAP Lab that General Saltzman mentioned, but also things like how do you onboard capabilities, things like the front door from COMSO, both onboarding and then enabling and ensuring capabilities throughout contingencies and conflicts with things like the Commercial Augmentation Space Reserve. So we'll be happy to participate in these discussions. I was looking over to my left, and this feels a little bit like a JCO staff meeting, so I'm going to turn this over. Go ahead.
Thanks, Barb, and thank you, Victoria. So also glad to be here, and I note the picture on there. You might be disappointed by what's standing in front of you rather than the picture on the screen. For the UK, it's challenging. So what is SDA? And we're not going to answer that question today, but we've had to break it down because it's a huge problem statement. So we've got space surveillance and tracking, space environmental monitoring, space situation awareness, and then threat mitigation and space domain awareness. And we've parsed that out, so we've got different leads for each part. So we have our Met Office that lead on the space environmental monitoring, our Space Agency who lead on risk and hazard mitigation, so space situation awareness, and then the military side is space domain awareness. And we pool all that together in our National Space Operations Centre, which is joint civil and mil. So those different organisations all have different touch points for multinational collaboration, and that's something I think we'll get into. JCO is something I will also labour on, Barb. I think that's really a key one. It's a team sport, though. We can't do it alone. We are, resource constrained. We understand that, and I think multinational collaboration is absolutely at the heart of what we're trying to develop.
G'day, Group Captain Rex Harrison. Good to be back here. First time I was here was in 2015, and to do the international point of view, I was here because the US paid for me to be here, because I was then working at the Joint Space Operations Centre at Vandenberg. We can't do these things alone. This is not Australia alone. We've been working with allies for decades. My space career started at the Royal Military College of Canada a little over 20 years ago, so we're always working with our international partners. In terms of SDA is a journey for Australia. We have been users of space since the 1960s. We probably haven't been an informed customer of space up until maybe 20, 25 years ago. So we are working through that journey. So particularly with the SDA journey as to what end we're doing space domain awareness. That has been an open question as we move forward, as been mentioned by Barb. I think we are now moving towards the what do we need in competition, then what do we need in crisis, and if it comes to a conflict, and understanding those requirements because they shift in time and space. Thanks.
Okay, so some questions I had for the panelists, and again, looking for questions from the audience as well. I'm going to start with Barb. So, correct me if I'm wrong, I'd love to be corrected on this, but I believe the United States has SDA sharing agreements with 33 countries. And I'd love to know, what have you learned in the process of sharing SDA data to date that might be helpful for states newer to sharing SDA data? You know, how has this process been in sharing data through or with NATO? Has that been a helpful pathway for this? And then finally, are there any countries that you wish you had an SDA sharing agreement with that you do not?
Okay, so I think there's actually several hundred SSA sharing agreements, so I'll actually defer that question to U.S. Space Command J5 since they're the managers of the SSA agreements. But there are a couple of those that I can answer. So what have we really learned in the process of doing SSA data sharing to date? One of the first things I would say is do not start at classified levels. First, start at unclassified, or better yet, not classified. Start with commercial. Look at how to, it helps when you have your own data repositories. I've made that mistake where I bought everything all at once because I thought it would be easier. And when things became non-performant, it was, when you had to replace somebody, you lost everything. You lost the sensors and all the data that was in the data repository because it wasn't yours. So being able to partition out major functions, it was a big lesson learned. You'd think it was an obvious lesson learned, but it took me a couple tries to get that right. And so hopefully we can save you some scar tissue on that. Things like learning how to set up your right data formats so that you're not bound by proprietary formats and reference frames. Those pieces, if you can get that right early, start at unclassified, practice interacting with your commercial partners, practice interacting with your partners at unclassified levels. You can help take the shackles off of the basics when everything gets worse when you go to classified levels. And so I'd say crawl, walk, run your way through it, but start at unclassified. That makes everything a whole lot easier when it comes to data sharing. When you're asking about NATO, like how's the process been for data sharing with NATO? NATO's a critical partner. We've got the NATO Space Center actually here in the front row with us. They're actually a major node inside of the JCO. They have been fantastic as far as mission sharing. Not just data sharing, though we do that too, but mission sharing, being able to incorporate manpower from NATO in order to bring capabilities to bear more quickly. We've been looking at how to help them with the most recent, I think it's the Space Domain Awareness Capability Program plan that they're setting up in order to implement that strategy that they laid out for SDA. They're looking at their own data repositories intended to be interoperable with ours. They're looking at how to adapt marketplaces. Like we use a global data marketplace here in the United States. I think you guys do as well, or maybe it's Australia. And they're looking at how to bring in some of the contracting nuances from NATO and put that into the marketplace and make it so they can fully bring in commercial capabilities. They're leveraging training programs that we're doing together in order to make sure that we can trade people and capabilities quickly. So a lot of good sharing, I would say mission sharing or mission shifting, where we're really enabling them to do that themselves. Really great partnership with the NATO team. And I'd use that as one of our prime examples besides the ones on the stage as far as successes within our operations.
Thank you. So Amandeep, can you talk about India's indigenous SSA system and how it's grown over the past several years? What are some big milestones that are coming up as India continues to mature its capabilities? And does the Indian military incorporate data from external or commercial SSA sensors?
Primarily to answer this question, if you see the India's efforts, Indian Space Research Organization started way back. From explorations, from various other missions. Now, the game entirety has been structured in a very organized way. Firstly, it is the cost-effective missions, because cost in a longer run plays a very significant role. Secondly, it is the partnership and the collaboration in-house and outside with the global partners, whether it is military or industry. Thirdly, it is the in-house giving opportunity to the space startups, collaborating this military and the space startups, giving them an opportunity for using the government assets. Moreover, if we collectively understand all these things, they form part of, again, what India is going further in a collaborative approach of industry, academics, and military. Why industry? We have to collaborate because of the faster innovation cycles. From the government point of view, the research and R&D takes time, and there are other protocols and regulations needs to be followed. Giving opportunity and space to the industry and invite them for the missions gives, as a government, a good boost. Then academics. If we understand, we see space as the only technical domain, and the new space policy of 2023 in India has given a clear, different picture in which the new structures have been created under the government, making them a real opportunity provider for the academics, wherein the new domains beyond the scope of technical domains are being taught, the youngsters, the new generation is being trained, whether it is space law, whether it is space policy, and so on and so forth. And last is the military. Military users being in this space domain, I personally say that I was never inclined to go for that academic part of it. However, last a decade plus, from the legal thing, I studied a little bit, from the air and space law, certain education, then from the space economy. So there are so many new opportunities with the India's government has opened up, which were never there, which was purely under the government domain of Indian Space Research Organization and at the most the Defense Research Development Organization. Now, this new Indian space policy, in addition to the real intent and the platform given for the IAM, that is Industry, Academics, and Military Sphere, to grow it collectively and converge it at the top to give out a realistic picture, and as it has been brought out earlier also by the various speakers, the space is the global domain. So we can't be in a restrictive approach. We can't have that restrictive approach. It has to be open approach, open mind approach with all the domains flowing and growing together.
Great, thank you. Nick, in June 2023, the United Kingdom created a joint task force, Space Defense Commercial Operations Cell, JCO UK, to augment the existing US JCO located at Schriever Space Force Base in Colorado. In the year plus since then, what have been the results of the process so far, both in terms of improvements and areas that could use some strengthening?
So what's JCO ever done for us, to misquote Monty Python? I think it's a fair statement to say that it's a fair statement to say that I think
ignore the person to your right and be open.
No pressure. Yeah, no. I think
this is a safe space.
We have fundamentally in the UK changed the way that we are delivering SDA based on our participation in JCO. So Barb and the team came across in 2023, but actually we've been doing it for a year before that, trying to get ourselves competent. And after the op-eval, I think we had 3 people checked out. We're now up to 15. Why? because it is the perfect training vehicle to get our operators, because we don't have a space force, so we have people coming from the other services, very keen operators, but with no space experience. So how do we develop them to a point where they can be competent, suitably qualified and experienced, so that they can then innovate? And so we've used JCO as a vehicle to develop our people, bring them into national operations in the National Space Ops Centre and one Space Ops Squadron, and then innovate at high side, at higher classifications. So going back to Barb's point, crawl, walk, run. And we now have a series of exercises that we are developing, protection of our national interests and defence of our national assets in collaboration with our allies as well. So it's been hugely useful for that. I think sort of building on that point as well, we're also the regional coordinator for the Meridian Cell and have been for a while, and I think that's given us an opportunity, certainly in the European AOR, to look at how we can collaborate with allies and with NATO and pull through what are those requirements for SDA sharing, and what is it we need to do at the not classified level. Challenges. So what is it that we're struggling with? I think the pace of change within JCO is a perennial challenge for us. And we don't have the same policies in place that the US does. A classic example would be passive RF. The UK doesn't recognise that term. For us, if we're collecting RF terrestrially, well, that's SIGINT. So I need to go and talk to my intelligence community, who, when I say I want to collect using a commercial source via a third-party nation, oh, by the way, there's no classifications involved, there's a long pause on the phone and then a request for a longer meeting to discuss the problem set. So you can imagine how how long that takes. But Barb and the team have been fantastic at helping us getting through that. But as we evolve and move into sort of new mission sets, that's going to be a perennial challenge for us. I think that's it. Thanks.
Barb, I feel like I need to give you a right of reply on this one. What about your thoughts? How's our RCO been evolving?
No, I actually think they're great. So they've actually been really fun as the first try on basically everything. As in, I can always count on you guys to have a go. I don't know how it'll go, but we'll have a go. And that's actually been really great. And I say that with love and affection, actually. They have a go usually before the Americans do. So, for example, the exercises they were just describing, we've been practicing things like commercial integration into high side operations and interactions with the Allied SPOCs. We went out to train them, walk them through, here's what it is when you're dealing with certain types of threats. And we trained like all 106 of them, I think, over the course of a week. And it wasn't just space domain awareness. It was all the space domain awareness operators, everyone tied to the command and control center, everyone tied to their high value asset operations, all of the developers tied to high value asset operations, including the program managers and requirements guys. And then they ran these exercises. We ran one with them, and then they ran, like, I don't know how many you've done since then, 6 or so, every 6 weeks since last November. They've had more reps and sets than any American unit I know of. And so that's an example of when they say they're going to have a go, they're not only going to have a go, they're going to take it and run with it and turn it into a better exercise program than we have. And so I love having the allies do this, is because the way they take off with it and go is often quite unique and very inspiring.
Thank you. Good to hear. Rex, Australia, the US, and the UK are all partners in the Deep Space Advanced Radar Capability, or DARC program, with Australia being the host of the first site. Are there any other AUKUS, Australia, UK, US, efforts specific to sharing SDA data?
Yeah, well, thanks for the question about DARC. It's a very important capability for Australia and the other partners in that arrangement. For Australia, it builds on our previous relationships around the relocation of the C-band radar to Australia and the Space Surveillance Telescope. So there's a long pathway there that we're building on. Very important capability. Importantly, for a good news story, it's on track, it's on schedule. All the antennas are up. Bit of a surprising for a large project like this, but we're very much looking forward to the operations coming out the side of that. To the question in terms of AUKUS, I have to, if you read down the very last paragraph of the press release that was released in December, I think it was 2023 from the Australian government, DARC was offered as an exemplar of what AUKUS could deliver. And I think that sort of shows up some of the nuance there that it was a geographic reason why we have this relationship. We have the strategic geography that helped for that capability. And it also shows, I guess, the range of relationships we already have. So we are obviously deeply integrated with the US, and reaffirmed that with the Enhanced Space Cooperation announcement out of OSMIN in 2023 as well. Obviously deep ties with the UK through history. Wider than that, the Five Eyes sharing arrangements and safeguards, and then beyond that, the CSPOs. So we have a lot of options there. I'm not answering your question because I can't really speak to any specific opportunities there, but there are a lot of different mechanisms I think we can exploit when we have an opportunity that presents itself.
Well, it's good to have the groundwork laid, right? So when the opportunities present, you can move ahead with them quickly. So that's great to hear. Amandeep, India signed an SSA sharing agreement with the US in 2022. How has implementing that been carried out? How has that evolved through time? And has that agreement helped the members of the Quad share data with each other?
The signing of the Space Situational Awareness Agreement between India and the United States actually laid down a strong foundational strategic bilateral relationship. It initially started with a one-way transmission of the data. However, it focuses in times to come in future as a bilateral sharing of relationship wherein India can contribute also in a unique way. Once those levels are achieved, the things largely in the space domains are stabilized. Such kind of agreements are very, very helpful, wherein an established entity reaches out and then a growing economy, a growing country collaborates. So it's, I'll take it, it's a win-win situation in both the sides, wherein the learning from both these sides continues and grows. So such agreements are, and in future also, we will be entering into certain more agreements, wherein the space situational awareness data from both the sides are being shared. The project, what Indian Space Research Organization, that is Directorate of Space Situational Awareness, with a component called Netra. Netra in Indian or Hindi terms is called eyes in eyes. So the eyes in the sky, that is the main aim, which can give those vision to all our friendly countries, allies, and contribute collectively as a joint resource for each one in the agreement.
Thank you. So Rex, your turn now. How has the Australian military prioritized sharing SDA information amongst members of the Quad? And are there policies, budget commitments, joint exercises, or other ways in which to help the Quad work with each other operationally in space?
Yeah, and well, the Quad is a very important pillar of our foreign policy as a diplomatic relationship. Militarily, we are very much focused at our bilateral relations with each of the four nations, and so therefore our relationships, I guess, have different levels of maturity. So obviously, I've already covered, I won't go into in depth, but we have a long-standing relationship with the US. With Japan, we've worked with them with the JCO, and most recently the Japanese team came down for Exercise Talisman Sabre and worked as a combined JCO cell there, so that was great to have them there. India observed that exercise, and we expect that to grow. I guess because Amandeep's on the panel, our space relationship with India is probably nascent, safe to say. Whereas with Japan and the US, we have regular space engagement talks and so forth.
Great, thank you. Barb, earlier this year, Space Force released its international partnership strategy. So how is this anticipated to help with efforts to share SDA data with partners and allies? And does the Space Force's 2024 commercial integration strategy help with this as well?
Yes, they actually both do. And the two correlate actually pretty well. So I was very glad to see that. Some of the key features in those strategies are things like empowering partners to be combat multipliers. integrated by design, those sorts of functions. The JCO is actually a really good example, I think, of this. It functions as a virtual mission support team. We have over 100 allies that are on crew globally. They are the bulk of our manpower, by far, for this sort of support. They're supporting all 8 U.S. Space Force components and multiple allied SPOCs with SDA information. They're actually essential for keeping up with the absolute barrage of capabilities that come from commercial. I think Colonel Singh mentioned this earlier. When you plug into commercial, the accelerant actually outruns you very quickly as far as many of our processes. It's not just the data. It's not just the speed of analytics. It's actually you outrun your resourcing. And I know I'm looking at my new SPOC boss. He's delighted to hear that. But you outrun your resourcing as far as, and it's not just finances. You outrun your people, your manpower resourcing very fast. Let's give some examples of that. It took us a little over 2.5 years to stabilize threat custody, geo protect and defend in one orbit regime. And then after that, we activated PNT situational awareness in 14 months. And then we activated TAC SRT in 14 months. And then we're about to activate SATCOM situational awareness. That will be in less than 12 months. Every single one of these things required its own training program, its own mission support crew set, all this integration for how we were plugging into multiple deltas, multiple components on the high side. And our manpower structure can't keep up with that. Our resourcing structure couldn't keep up with that. There's just not enough Americans to keep up with an industrial onslaught like this. And I'm not saying slow down. I'm saying when we're looking at what it means to plug in commercial, it's not just the data that you have to deal with when you plug in commercial. Adding commercial to a delta blows the top off the delta as far as how fast you will be going across every process required for resourcing, every single one, and it's not just technical. And it can be quite shocking. It's very easy to be overrun by the development tempo. So I've said this before, we are not allied by design, we're allied by desperation inside of the JCO. Like, we just can't keep up. I mean, that conversation you were having, I remember it's called passive RF, and the SIGINT guys in the UK going, no, it's not. Looking at how to adjust those policies and what it is we had to do. Every single nation requires a kind of a walkthrough, and it's been a choose-your-own adventure, I think, for every nation. Look, he's rolling his eyes at me. You can't see that from over there. But it is a choose-your-own adventure. So I think that's been an interesting part, looking at how to implement the international and commercial strategies. These are things we've been learning. Other major tenets like interoperability have been really important, and that's an area where I would actually highlight our training program. You actually heard this from Rex earlier. The Japanese came down to be part of an exercise, and they plugged right into the Australian ops floor. They knew exactly where they're all trained to the same standard. It's like a NATO STANAG, but it's global. We had the Germans do that recently, where they came from NATO and did supported a South Korean exercise, and the German team plugged right into the South Korean team. They're trained to the same standard. They're used to the same data. We understand how to do this, and that's what you get when you are implementing these sorts of international partnership strategies. Does that help?
It does indeed. Thank you. Nick, you were nodding pretty heavily in terms of the challenges for incorporating commercial data. I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about the UK's experience with that, as well as how's your experience been in terms of sharing data with both European partners and through NATO?
So on the commercial front, I echo everything Barbara's just said. I think we could drown in data if we wanted to. The challenge is, how do you exploit it, and what is it you're trying to achieve? And in fact, you can map that across onto our relationship with NATO and our European partners as well. So, what do we want to do with SDA data? What is the end state? And that's not necessarily the same for every nation or for every multinational collaboration. And so, trying to understand what it is you're trying to do, and therefore what raw data you need, what information you need to derive, and how you need to pass that around is really the big challenge that we're trying to work through. So I guess, what's our experience been? I think it's been pretty positive on the whole, but there are challenges. So JCO is a classic example of of a way that we can work with NATO, with our European partners, and work well, but we don't have that challenge of classification or national release caveats or anything else. We do have a data rights challenge there in terms of what can be shared, but that's workable. So, as we start to move up the classifications, the Five Eyes, information sharing arrangement that's been developed over 50 years, and it's not owned by Ministry of Defence in the UK, so it's not something we can easily change. So if I want to go and share information with our partners, the Germans, say, or the French, that can be really challenging. We have individual bilateral relationships, but if I can't just tag on France and Germany onto a Five Eyes releasable product and send it out. So how do we overcome those challenges, and what information do we need to share, and how do I get that release authority? Those are the things we're trying to work through. I think that there are some opportunities there. So combined space operations, that includes a lot of our European partners. We're working through that. I think that doesn't necessarily give us the stick we need to beat the intelligence community with necessarily, but Op Olympic Defender, the multinational force, does, because it's a named op, and so we've successfully managed to share data under that a number of times. How we do that is a different challenge, which I'll come on to, but I think this is a bit of a tongue twister, but the NATO Federated Mission Network Space Command and Control Tiger Team, the FMN-STT, is something that we're heavily bought into. So using CCSDS frameworks, developing a schema. So Barb has the Unified Data Library, and we are tying our National Space Ops Center C2 system into that. So we're aligned with the UDL schema. But now we're looking at the future in terms of how we're going to share with our multinational partners, and importantly, what are we going to share? That's where FMN STT comes in. So by 2030 or thereabouts, I fully expect our Borealis system to be interoperable with allies by design. I think I'll leave it there.
Okay, thank you. I guess Rex and Amandeep, I'm going to give you guys a chance now to talk about how challenges or the way that Australia and India have dealt with incorporating commercial information and data into your systems.
Yeah, if I could jump in first.
Please.
And maybe just to leverage off there was a few good points there. Has been hammered by one of your UK colleagues to me, Toby Stewart, for the last 3 years at Colorado Springs. The Five Eyes share isn't a sharing arrangement. It's a safeguards that when we share, that we're going to look after your data. And so that's not a technical solution. That's a policy solution. That's a counterintelligence solution to make sure that we can trust each other. Once you can trust people, then you can work out a technical solution. So I think that's important there. To your question in terms of the commercial, yeah, we are with our commercial data buys. To Nick's point, we are moving beyond. I think we wanted more. We've got more. Now, what are we going to do with that more? And I think working through what do we actually need to achieve? And that's the challenge that I have looking into the future. What are the operational scenarios that we're actually planning for? Because it's really easy to deal with the day-to-day, as General Saltzman said, the here and now, and we're in competition, and plan and acquire capabilities for that and data for that. But actually that might not be the data that we need on the day. And finding out too late that actually you've got a whole bunch of data, but it doesn't actually help you, you've just wasted money. So that's the challenge that we're working through at the moment.
Amandeep, thoughts?
Largely, if given to understand the broader subject of space domain awareness, the future, what we see, the understanding, what we see, it will range from the bilateral and the minilateral agreements in cooperation. The relevance of these agreements increases manifold because we all are, if I may be allowed, incomplete to some extent individually. However, we'll get complete when we come together. And in a domain of space, there are many things with respect to whether it is the geographical concerns, the launch vehicles, the technology advancements, the HR, what Barbara has brought out, the HR, the human resource, the training, the academics, the education. There's so many commonalities which we might face as individual challenges. However, those challenges will convert to, I'll say, a good, promising future once we come together and collaborate. So we need to understand that the game is the collaboration, not the competition. And in a very simple and the Indian way, or largely we have all been two balloons with air. We have played during our childhood. My balloon, Victoria's balloon. We are all playing. But the moment balloon bursts, it cannot be Victoria's air and my air. That is a global thing. So that perspective has to be understood from its depthness and give it a clear shape for the future generations.
Okay, thank you. And actually, that's a nice lead into my last question that I had prepared, and I'm moving on to the audience questions portion. But for anyone, I tend to like this format, 5 years from now, but looking ahead to the end of the decade, 2030, how do you see the state of international military SDA sharing? What do you think we'll have struggled with? What do you think we'll still be struggling with? And what do we think we will have fixed? Happy, anyone wants to jump in on this one?
I got it.
Barb?
I got 3. Okay, so we'll be building on the JCO. That's fine. We'll be building on things like data repositories that are sovereign. We're looking at one for NATO. I think Australia already has its own. So I think we'll have gone past that. Like the data pieces, how it's formatted, I think we'll have moved beyond that. We'll have plugged this into our commercial analytics and our sovereign analytics networks. That's not a bad baseline. So I'm pretty hopeful as far as the next 5 years. Where I think we're going to struggle, classified data exchange. So we'll have gotten all the technical problems, a lot of the technical pieces done, but we will slam head on into the security data tagging for machine-to-machine exchange at secret and top secret. And that has gone over like a lead balloon. So we're gonna have to try this, and it can't just be Five Eyes. And I don't think we have one successful example yet. So that's one that I think will be wildly entertaining over the next 5 years. I would volunteer Poland or Japan or something like that for that in order to see how we do it. But it can't just be that we're going to do this with the Five Eyes. We've got to work through the classification wickets so that we get a template for how we have to tag metadata to be able to do this machine to machine. Because if any of you have ever tried to send an email over Pegasus, this is going to take a really long time to run combat operations across teams. That just can't be what we're doing, and we've got to get that to, we've got to try a couple fail cycles. Try-fail cycles are pretty normal in commercial operations. We've got to run up against that, knowing it's probably not going to work the first couple times in order to incrementally fail forward and get at least one of those things to work over the next couple of years. That's one. The other one is, though I think we will have done fantastic on data sharing, code sharing is a different type of challenge. And so I would actually ask us, as we're looking forward, to partition the problem set between data and apps. Because it's one thing to look at, okay, we're going to process the same type of data to do that. Process on what? Like, what apps are you using, what algorithms? We made great progress on things like ITAR when it came to data. Like the upgrades in ITAR in, I think it was 2017, were fantastic for really freeing the data from commercial across international teams. But as soon as you're talking about code, software code bases, that is quite a challenging problem set. And I don't know that we have figured out how to do that, even within the Five Eyes, quite frankly, and definitely not beyond. So things like, we will have very different processors for how to do this. You've mentioned, I think it was Borealis. So, ask our teams how where REL is for whatever we're calling JMS today. Great. This is going to be tough. So, going data-centric may be the only way that we can look at how to get a similar answer on very different processing systems. So we're using the similar types of data sets. We process on sovereign systems. We're pulling this up to higher levels. I actually think that those are the two areas, security and code bases, that are going to be the challenges we have to work through over the next 5 years.
Let's see where we are in 5 years from now. Remember that. Amandeep, you had thoughts on this?
Just to add what Barbara said, from 5 years from now, 4 primary things we'll be facing. We'll be seeing significant advancement in the technical collaborations, no doubts on that. Number 2 would be bilateral and unilateral data sharing agreements. Number 3, as Barbara has brought out, standardized data formats. And lastly, to my understanding, it would be in an integrated network. But I fully agree with the challenges, the major challenge what Barbara has brought out, that will be integrating and verifying data from the ever-growing population of commercial providers and non-state actors, which may bring complexities to the military establishments. So things will get more organized, things will get more structured. However, trust remains the main fundamental thing of jointness for space situational awareness. Thank you.
I guess the follow-up question is, how do you develop that kind of trust? How do you develop that kind of trust?
That it's again a part of a structured, I'll say, process. We have to create such kind of tabletop exercises. We have to create data sharing agreements and testing each other. It is not like what General Saltzman brought out. We also find it very difficult in convincing the imminent threat or imminent thing which is from the space domain to the remaining our counterparts. So conferences like AMOS, the Indian setups like we have our, what I have repeatedly said during the conversation, the IAM, the Industry Academic Military Collaboration, such things will bring trust. Last 26 years, this is the 26th year, last 25 years, the archival knowledge of the AMOS has given a great, I'll say, a theory, a foundational theory that will make a great story. So for breaking and the distrust and creating more foundational trust to grow further, we have to have strong theories to create bigger and better stories.
Thank you. Makes sense. Nick or Rex, do you guys have thoughts about looking ahead 5 years from now? What will we have done right, and what do we still need to work on?
Yeah, and I think I'm going to sort of echo Barb's comments there in positive and negative. So positively, from an Australian perspective, I think we will have rolled out our data fabric. We will have enhanced our resiliency as for operations, looking towards preparing for the worst. So I think that will put us in a much better place than we are today. I guess the challenge, maybe looking in Barb's direction, when you're talking about coding and so forth, and to take off General Saltzman's comments about that international sharing and leveraging the resources that we have, I think the challenge we'll have is, and maybe elements like the SDA Tab Lab are a solution to that, is how does an Australian company write an algorithm or a bit of code, and then it has a pathway for incorporation into the greater whole. Obviously, the US has a really good ecosystem for doing that. We're much smaller, at the scale of 1/15th the size here in Australia, but how do we make those linkages easier and allow the best and the brightest to provide the products where we need them, and for us then to share among the people who have agreed that we want to do Olympic Defender, CSPO, whatever. How do we actually do that? There's quite a few obstacles at the moment.
Thank you. Nick?
So I'd echo the points of Rex, Barb, and Amandeep, frankly, in terms of what I expect to be successful. I think one of the main challenges I see is duplication of effort. So we're moving away from the term sovereign in the UK to more nationally separable. We want to have assured access to information and systems to allow us to do national operations, but as part of a collaboration or a coalition. And so if we're going to get the basics right and we're going to have that assured access, that understanding to inform our own national security decisions, well, surely every other nation is as well. So we're replicating the same processes, we're duplicating effort. And if we're going to do that as part of a coalition, going back to Amandeep's point, how do we build that trust so that we can pass that work out and be more efficient? I think that's going to be one of the major challenges.
Definitely. Interesting question from the audience. Sharing data with allies and partners is a great way to start or enhance collaboration. But sharing data or finished products derived from data can also reduce demand for commercial data if partners get what they want, that they need from the U.S. government. So how do we balance the two priorities of allied collaboration and the healthy industrial base?
I've got one there. Okay. So I was wondering when that was going to come up. So I think that question actually had a very good split, or one of the answers did, as far as data and information. I actually do not do a lot of data sharing, because I don't own the commercial data that I lease. The commercial companies own it. We fuse it, we create an information picture that is static. You cannot add an ob or anything to it. So I'd actually look at it, the way I challenge the teams is, we're actually functioning in many cases like an advertisement. Here's the situation around your high value asset. It's not great. You're gonna want more data. These are the teams that help create that picture. Go ask them. And so if you look at it from that perspective, yes, what we're providing is a shared awareness. And the pull for that additional data happens the moment an event occurs. So an event occurs, that shared picture that I don't have a problem becomes all of a sudden, oh, I do have a problem, and now I need more. But it's not my data to share. So go ask all the subsidiary teams that help provide that information. You have it. You have access to all the right formats. Go get it. That's not just for the allied partners, it's also for the commercial partners. So we run the commercial integration cell as well, and we have 17 commercial mission partners that are part of this. And they'll ask, like, are you going to do all these pieces? No. I'm going to provide you an alert and notification of something happening. We're going to help train you and exercise with you about what it is that's going to be occurring. But you are enabled to take responsibility for what's happening around your own assets, including additional data buys and other pieces. And that's why we're doing things like teaching different teams how to do global data marketplace purchases. We actually do financial training, like tactical finance and contracting training as well, so that folks can plug into the market. And so I do get the, like, hey, you're sharing an awareness picture, but it is a relatively static, like a one-off point in time awareness picture. And if in that point in time you've got a problem, you're gonna need more. And so what it is we've enabled you to plug into the rest of the market to go get more and handle your problem.
Thank you. Thoughts from the rest of the panel? We're good. Okay. Barb solved it. Thank you, Barb. A couple questions coming in about cyber in terms of sharing data. I think this one, do we have cyber defense requirements for commercial and international providers? How do we assess and communicate the risk of susceptibility for cyber attacks for each source? How does the panel view integration of space cyber SSA into the overall SSA SDA enterprise?
Just to start off on that, if I can answer from an Australian perspective, no, but we have an emerging requirement for that. And the reason I say that is I think our current posture is around competition. And so our database and our commercial relationships are excellent, but we need to ask the question of, if war was to extend into space and we move into crisis or conflict, would those commercial partners still be there? Because that's also potentially going to be a hole in our coverage. So I think that's an emerging area. I'm by no means a cyber expert. I've got Mo, my flight lieutenant engineer in the back, who knows all about data And I used to know about computers, but apparently not anymore. But I recognize that that's an important thing that we probably focus on because it's commercial and it's not classified. I think very quickly we'll become dependent on it or aspects of it and then realize when it goes how much we miss. So.
I do one more thing that I'd pile on there. It's actually one of the reasons why, one of many reasons why we never buy just one. The other piece to that question, I don't think we have to tell our commercial companies that there are cyber problems. The first targets in Ukraine were commercial. Like, they know. And they're accounting for that. And so being able to do things like fail over, have multiples, understand when you have degraded data from one source or site, be able to flag that and decrement the use of that data set tactically. If it's an analytical piece, have multiple analytical tools. It is not a bad thing for us to have a UK and Australian processing system that is fundamentally separate from ours. Because then when, not if, ours go down, okay, we can use yours. So I would look at the Allied by Design as a form of resiliency, having multiples. It's a form of crowdsourcing. We don't harden in the JCO. We fail over. And that's kind of the construct that we're using so that all the allies can access, but we are practicing a PACE plan plus all the time for every function that we have. And I would say that one of the most important pieces for us is cyber monitoring and the live practice to fail over. Because it just gets normal of this one goes down, move to the next one. This one goes down and move to the next one. We did a hot failover practice with the UDL where we assumed an entire section of an Amazon region went down, and we just shut off our access to the US UDL and failed over to the Australian one, and I think it took less than like 30 seconds, where all the apps were shifted over to their data repository. So as long as you're aware of it, our commercial companies are aware of it, and you practice it and you train it, and you have alternatives as part of a PACE plan and beyond, which our commercial companies can give us, you can operate through this.
Great, thanks. Other thoughts on panel?
All I'd add to that is, it's cyber resilience is something that we're looking for our national data procurements as well. So whilst Barbara's providing that broader piece, and we expect to see some failover there, we're also looking at having some more assured access as well. And then we have our own sovereign centre. So yes, it's a PACE plan.
Anyone else? Well, we're running close on time, so I think we're going to wrap up with the final thoughts from the panel. I like to ask this question a lot, so if you'll indulge me, if there's one takeaway you want people to take from your remarks today, if they absorb it, what would that be? So maybe I will start, avoiding my eye contact. I'll start with Barb. Could you tell us what your takeaways?
I would really focus on when you plug into commercial, you have to consider the entirety of the resourcing, not just the money, but also the training of the people. It enables interoperability, it enables failover strategies, and it enables an acceleration into operations that I don't know that we truly understand. We spend a lot of time focused on it technically accelerated, but it accelerates so much of everything else, and I don't know that we're used to that in our resourcing constructs as we as a service organize, train, and equip not only one combatant command, but 11 combatant commands with commercial services.
Thank you. Nick.
So I guess the point I'd like to highlight is that nationally separable one. So I think as we move forward, we're keen to avoid vendor lock, if I'm putting it bluntly. So we don't want to be tied to one vendor and all of the risk that might associate. So developing the offer to allow piecemeal selection of different products, I think is probably where we see the market going.
X.
Right, I probably didn't talk enough about it, but requirements, small R requirements, not highly detailed OCD, FPS, but to what end are we doing what we're doing? And to what end are you developing your commercial products? What is the operator need? I think once you do that, a lot of things flow out of that. Sometimes we reverse engineer a need out of a cool capability, and that fails more times than it succeeds.
Amandeep, last thoughts.
Towards the last, I would just like to add on. 50 years ago, if we have not thought of space, we have not been here at today. Now, the innovation, the invention, the scope of growth lies only in thinking what next for 50 years. And everything now has converged to space, whether it is a military operation, whether it is a civilian, I'll say, a medical emergency from an evacuation. And interestingly, the conference is happening through space, through satellite. It is being transmitted to various nations and various live streaming being done. So understanding space is an integral part of human nature now. So my takeaway from AMOS 2026 conference would be, I'm space. So if I'm space, I have to develop for my future generations accordingly. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Good thoughts. Please join me in thanking our panel for a fascinating discussion.